Welcome to the Garden Podcast, sponsored by the Garden Worship Experience at San Diego United Methodist Church in Encinitas, California. My name is Faith Daniel, Director of Community Engagement, and my co-host is Mark Maddix, the lead pastor. We welcome you to the Garden Podcast. The goal of the Garden Podcast is to help people of faith think critically, love authentically, and serve compassionately.
And today we welcome to the Garden Podcast Dr. Catherine Keller, Professor of Constructive Theology at Drew University. Dr. Keller is a world-renowned scholar, author, and speaker. As a constructive theologian, Dr. Keller's work is oriented around social and ecological justice, post-structuralist theory, and feminist reading of scripture and theology. It's great to have you with us, Catherine, my friend, and we welcome you to the Garden Podcast.
Well, thank you, Mark and Faith, and I'm still retaining some of the vibes of having been with you at your church in person, not very many months ago. So
Yes,
glad.
we enjoyed so much having you and still hear great things about your time with us. And I shared with the group on Sunday, the forum group, which you spoke at. I said, we're going to be doing a podcast and they're excited to hear from you again. So today we're going to talk about your book that came out just a few years ago called Facing Apocalypse. I'll give a little shout out here for it. And really, really interesting read, and I think a very appropriate read, especially given the climate and the context that we find ourselves in even today. So, yeah, definitely fits well. So maybe just begin for those who might be watching who are not familiar with your work, and particularly this book. Maybe just give us I don't know, a little brief synopsis of or overall kind of thesis of your work, particularly as it relates to, your title around climate and thinking about last chances.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Mark. Uh, my work in general has been of a kind of theology that really wants to focus on our relationships, on our being relational beings and becoming moment to moment in fresh ways of being together, sometimes fresh, but very unfortunately so. Sometimes violent, sometimes repressive, sometimes numb, but sometimes, as I experienced with you two, and as I did with your church, very vibrant, tuned relationality, which in my book, in all of my books, is what we really are. We are these relational creatures, not just interrelated with each other as humans, but really interrelated to the whole world, to the earth around us. And so I appreciate the the plant with its roots that's
Yeah, yeah.
there, at least on my screen. I don't know if anyone else could see it,
Yes,
but
yeah.
it's a beautiful symbol of this kind of rootedness in a non-human depth of relationality that we depend on and that brings us into relationship with each others. But yeah, so all of my work has in one way or another uh, looked into that relationality, sometimes in a more feminist way, sometimes in an eco-social way. Then this book, Facing Apocalypse, is trying to actually reread the book of Revelation, the actual apocalypse, from a radically relational, life-affirming point of view, but a life-affirming point of view that is also a point of view very worried about what's happening with life on our planet. Uh, whether we recognize that we are rooted in all of the other creatures of the earth, and that doesn't make us less Christian, it makes us more so. Uh, that we really come out of Adamah, the earth,
Yeah, yeah.
and Hava, mother of life, and have have been on a turbulent adventure as a species ever since. So this book is reflecting on the concern that a lot of us have from very different points of view, that human adventure uh, might be coming to some kind of really dangerous climax. I mean that there's some threat that we as a species pose to ourselves, or
Mhm.
that some segments of our species in particular pose to most of the rest of us, and to all the other species perhaps as well. That this threat uh, is is not just randomly connected to the ancient metaphor of apocalypse. It's a hard word to use at all when you're a liberal or progressive Christian, because apocalypse has been so co-opted by the religious right for over half a century. They've really been riding, the end of
Yeah.
the world. It's always going to come in a few years, and somehow the
Yeah.
congregation doesn't mind, of course, that it gets postponed and postponed. But it started to seem to me already in the last millennium important to reclaim the book of Revelation, really reclaim, reread the Apocalypse. After all, it's the last book of the Bible. I had been more preoccupied like with the first book of the Bible, Genesis, but so there's a kind of alpha omega
Mhm.
Yeah.
spiral, I think, in my work now. And I felt we had to take the metaphor of apocalypse with new seriousness, partly in order to uh, help people get free of the sort of fundamentalist readings of it, and the way that those readings can serve as a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you have people who have a literalist reading of the apocalypse aligning themselves often with forms of right-wing politics that are not unlikely to bring on the end of a lot of at least the habitable world as we know it through tremendously irresponsible ecological uh, perspectives and actions
Mhm.
and denials, as well as occasionally through militaristic threats. This moment we're more in the radical threat to our shared Earth environment that gets posed. So the folk who take on the apocalypse on the religious right to align themselves with the political right uh, need to be resisted in many ways. But one way, I think, is for other Christians to read another apocalypse.
Yeah.
That is, I believe, to read more faithfully what John of Patmos, the presumed author of the Book of Revelation, was writing about. Because I think it is relevant, very relevant to our time, but very differently from fundamentalist and literalist readings. Let me pause there.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's a good,
That's
it
where
gives
you
us,
want us to go.
yeah, it gives us a good framework of your
Yeah.
work, and we'll dig in a little deeper with some questions regarding that. So, and again, as we said in the beginning, this is certainly timely. I know the book was written, a few years ago, but certainly very timely for the period in which we live. So, we'll continue that conversation around the book of Revelation.
Yeah. So you talk about the book of Revelation with a focus on injustice and climate change, and you use a lot of language of dream weaving to talk about how to read Revelation and make a connection with injustice and climate change. And can you tell us more about how you make this connection?
The dream reading kind of
Yeah.
connect. Yeah, thanks for lifting up that notion. Uh, by dream reading the apocalypse, what I meant is that we need to recognize the actual biblical genre of this text. It's a prophetic text in the tradition of Amos, Jeremiah, Hosea, uh, but radicalized and under the influence of what was not even yet called the Christian movement, but under the influence of the first couple of generations of the followers of Jesus. And so it was hooking the prophetic sense of the future into an early Christian experience. And that meant hooking the ancient prophetic sense that there will be great crisis, perhaps real civilizational catastrophe that will hurt both our cities, our agriculture,
Mhm.
uh, and and the whole non-human planet. There will be great damage, likely before there can be great transformation, the transformation that we in faith hope for, the transformation towards a faithful existence in which we honor the Creator and therefore treat fellow creatures with respect, in which we honor the second person of the Trinity,
Yeah, yeah.
acting actually in love, sometimes a very rigorous love, as we see in the book of Revelation. But when I talk about then the book of Revelation in terms of dream reading, I'm saying that it's picking up on the very visionary kinds of images of the prophets that had been largely prophesying and to some extent writing or getting written down 400 or 500 years before. And it's a very specific genre where they're having visions,
Mhm.
uh, and but real visions, not, it's what psychology today would usually call hallucinations.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, but visions are like waking dreams. And uh, some people still can have those, but I think it was a propensity that was much more cultivated in the ancient world. Uh, and so it's like very dreamlike images, uh, not put together in rational kinds of arguments or narratives, but popping forth in a kind of dreamy, visionary logic. So
Mhm.
I figured when we read our dreams, we have to use a different logic than when we, read a book of theology
Right. Right.
or novel. Uh, but we need to dream read. Uh, Also, when reading the book of Revelations, that is, we need to be sensitive to how metaphoric this language is, how it's stretching known language.
Mhm.
Uh, and so uh, you have very, very powerful images like the mourning eagle, wailing because it sees all the destruction that is coming. Well, John's not saying that he actually, heard an
Right.
eagle saying, oh, woe, is this humanity?" Uh, it's a vision that's dreamy, as are the images of uh, the whore of Babylon, that porn queen of the apocalypse, or the images of of uh, of the mother with the mysterious unnamed son who has to escape, she does, into the wilderness. All very powerful uh, metaphors, very dreamy, as is the final metaphor of the coming down
Mhm.
of an utterly transformed city called the New Jerusalem, an extremely dreamy image that then we can read in our time,
Mhm.
uh, not then by saying, "Oh yes, at such an hour or at such a date, there's the clouds are going to open up and we'll hear trumpets and
Right.
whole city is going to plop down on top of old New York here, which will be devastated by that point." So in the rubble. No, I mean that's an image that gets passed around. But if we think of these images as vision images, dream images, and then they charge up with another kind of force field, don't they? They're helping us to imagine what it would take uh, to experience that, what it would take to together in our communities of faith facilitate this radical renewal of our
Yeah.
urban civilization,
Mhm.
this new heaven and earth. What is it calling us to do? What is it calling us to hope for? What is it calling us to sense and to imagine together, but therefore to be inspired together, to act together? That's a lot. That's some of the dimensions that I mean by dream reading. But first of all, just with this text, to read it appropriately means to remember that it's dreamlike language,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
an instruction manual. If
Right.
it's that, well, then the atheists are right. It's just a bunch of nonsense.
Mm.
But no, it's a very potent set of images.
Yeah. I really like that imagery that you provide with this idea of, dream reading, and that helps give us a kind of a broader picture and kind of, in many ways, a broader understanding of the book. And especially you talk about in the book that, and you've already alluded to it, that a lot of more conservative Christians have viewed this book as a way to predict when the end's going to come and how it's going to take place. And I think you rightfully provide a sense of a broader literary reading of this book. And one of the things you say in the book is that John was addressing this vision that he has, was addressing the world around him during that time. And maybe talk to us a little bit about that. What was John envisioning and seeing? And then how does that relate to this broader understanding of climate, the ecological kinds of issues we're facing, and particularly kind of making it applicable to today? If that makes sense. Maybe I said too much there, but
That makes sense. Right. I mean, you specifically on should I focus on uh, the image of the Whore of Babylon, or both cities, the New Jerusalem and the
yeah, I like the focus on New Jerusalem. I think that would be helpful, particularly as it relates to as we think about this today and what it means for us in the world we live right now.
yeah, right. Well, above all, what it signals is the possibility of a radically transformed uh, human civilization that sits very differently on the earth. It's very much a garden city, right? With
Right,
the
right.
river of life flowing right through the center of it. Not like my city here, where I'm close to the Hudson, actually. I can see about 3 tablespoons of it from my window. Uh, but it's very much on the margin of the city.
Yeah.
But the sense of the city being built around this river of life, just that is a marvelous notion, because it this water of life, the river of life, is understood to be completely clean water that everyone can drink from.
Mhm.
So it's as though already there's a prophecy of how polluted things will be getting and will have gotten over the thousands of years since the prediction. Uh, and then this extraordinary environmental cleanup will have happened, so that the river that flows through this new city, that the city is round, is this crystal clear water that everyone that's free for everyone to drink. So we get the signals that water's free. And the ancient Near East and Middle East, then water was often very hard to come by, and that's still the case. And
Right.
it's very far from free. uh, Increasingly all around the planet, to get clean water is getting harder and harder. Uh, so it's a strangely liquid and literal symbol at one level, but it's also a symbol in the deepest sense of the metaphor of the water of life, that it's not just that there's this refreshment of the actual, physical water of the planet, so that people can drink and live well without cost. But the water of life is also like the water of baptism, the water of rebirth, of renewal. So that's one image of this new city that's grown up all around, and that it's all made of gemstones, so it's sparkling and beautiful. And it's an interesting image. It only struck me after I'd worked with this book occasionally through years, that old cities weren't nearly that sparkly. They didn't have glass windows.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting. I look out here, and even on this gray day, there's quite a lot of sparkling, just even in these rather dreary 20, 25 floor brick buildings out my window,
Yeah.
uh, from the windows. And, so there's a little hint of something there of the sparkling city, but it's not just about windows and a kind of luminosity and openness to the light that everyone would share. But of course, there's something about the multiple colors of the gems, meaning the great diversity of human life and experience within the city, but also just the brightness, the lightness conveys a kind of clarity, and a kind of joyfulness, and of course, also a shared affluence, a shared wealth.
Mm,
That's very much the case with the New Jerusalem.
Yeah.
It's depicted as a rich city, but everyone in it's rich.
Hmm.
Uh, Poverty has been overcome. So the affluence is shared about, but that doesn't mean that now everyone's poor, which is what
Right.
the rich
Yeah.
today tell us will happen.
Mhm.
right.
The middle class will just collapse if we try to seriously redistribute.
Mm,
Um, Oh, Musk. But we can, yeah, whereas the more we pass the billions on to the billionaires,
Yeah.
the happier those of us who are doing the passing will be.
right.
Mhm.
Right, right. So the New Jerusalem is clearly a vision that's dealing with systemic greed in its own period of history, and anticipating that that will get worse before it gets better.
Mm,
And that doesn't seem to have been a wrong prediction.
no.
We don't know about whether we're going to get better, but we
Yeah.
carry the vision and the possibility forward.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's good. That's really helpful. I like that imagery. It's really
Hmm.
helps bring the book to me very much alive and helps us to understand this broader vision about this New Jerusalem and especially that I had never thought about that in the sense of the water. That was really helpful.
Hmm.
Oh,
Uh,
good.
yeah. Thank you.
And the tree of life, of course,
Yeah,
growing.
of course.
Says,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
and what's great is it says the tree of life grows on either side of the river.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
So what kind of a tree is that? Well, it's very rhizomatic in some way, but it has quite a root system if it goes under the river. And
Yeah.
but it suggests that it's a whole forest, but with the image of somehow one being one tree, one root
Mhm.
system, generating this amazing kind of presence of trees in the new city, right? So it's a city that's just blessed by this fresh water of the river and trees everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Which today is, the more trees there are in a city, the more we appreciate the city.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Especially if the trees aren't just in the wealthy neighborhoods.
Yeah.
yeah. That's good.
In much of your work, you have been advocating for a counter-apocalyptic theology. Can you unpack this for us, what you mean by this concern about end is near approaches and that focus on second coming as compared to work towards justice and liberation in the present?
Yeah, that's a great question, Faith. Um, I coined that phrase counter-apocalypse as an alternative to anti-apocalypse. A friend of mine had written a book called Anti-Apocalypse, and I was sympathetic with it. It's a very feminist takedown of the Book of Revelation, and it's what probably most of us feminists felt in the 70s, 80s, maybe even now, most feminists, if they haven't worked on these issues biblically, would still feel that it's a horribly misogynist text, right?
Yeah.
So, so the anti-apocalypse was a very easy kind of progressive secular response, and progressive Christian response to the Book of Revelation. And even at seminary, often without any feminist input, the professors like Walt Brueggemann would push for the prophetic instead of the apocalyptic reading.
Mhm.
And I totally get that. But ultimately the idea is uh, to understand the Book of Revelation and its apocalypse uh, as truly a part of the prophetic tradition, not the whole new genre that's all about, predicting the end of the world in a more literal sense. The end is coming soon.
Mhm.
It's picking up on ancient images of great catastrophe, great collapse, great loss, and mourning, and uh, astonishing uh, transformation that's well worth hoping for, and a new beginning
Mhm.
in spite of all of that peril. Well, your question about counter-apocalypse, it's it's when I started realizing there's something redemptive about the apocalypse, that I didn't want to be part of just the anti-apocalypse kind of feminism or kind of liberal theology, even though I was sympathetic with it. But I also didn't want to just become an apocalyptic thinker.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I sort of join the fundamentalists.
right, right.
um, or pretend to join John Patmos community, but I'm just not that old. I'm old, but I'm not 2,000 years old. I can't get back there. So I I coined counter-apocalypse as an alternative to anti-apocalypse. And what counter means that's different from anti, isn't it? Is it when you counter something, you are resisting it. You might be opposing it in some ways. You're resisting it, but you're also mirroring it. You're giving an alternative to it. So the term counter-apocalypse suggests it's its own kind of apocalypse.
Mhm.
Whereas an anti-apocalypse doesn't really suggest it's an apocalypse that's anti other apocalypses. But a counter-apocalypse, I think, suggests it's its own apocalypse, its own reading of apocalypse that counters uh, other kinds of apocalypse, uh, but without pretending to erase that whole history,
Mhm.
let alone the text. So doing a counter apocalypse became a kind of discipline for me of, like two steps of expressing the critique of the kind of brutal dualisms of pure good and pure evil, and acceptance of mass destruction as necessary that we get in the Book of Revelation, or especially in some of its renditions. Proceeding to be on board with that which is opposed to that kind of apocalypse. So sensitive to the need for some anti-apocalypse, but also sensitive to the prophetic importance of the text,
Mm.
both as an influence in history that we have to realistically work with, but also as um, as a really meaningful ancient vision uh,
Mhm.
of of what is against all odds somehow possible. I mean, John was surrounded. We can talk about that more if you. I mean, he was surrounded by the Roman civilization that had utterly colonized his people of Israel, and uh, he grew up really in a situation that just almost took for granted this colonial imperialist presence of Rome, and it's often very brutal repressions of the Hebrews, of the Jews, and then of course also of the early Christians, especially if they seem to be in some way uh, threatening to imperial presumptions, or in some way suggesting that their authority or the authority of their God could in any way supersede the authority of Caesar. So, uh, what the Book of Revelation calls uh, the beast.
Yeah.
It's a sort of Satan image, but it's John's image for the Roman civilization, the imperial civilization of his day. And we have our equivalents
Right.
of, of that kind of Roman civilization. So the beast represents that, and the whore represents its economy. Anyway, we can talk about that
Right.
all if you like. But the point here is that those critical images haven't simply lost relevance, even though the context has changed dramatically, inasmuch as we still have forms of imperialism or neo-imperialism that are very based in hierarchical kinds
Mm.
of economic and political uh, arrangements. And so the force of the apocalypse is something we want to receive, not just be anti. And yet, by countering the apocalypse, we're also trying to press for nonviolent
Mhm. Yeah.
solutions
Yeah.
and to
Yeah.
interpret certain forms of angelic violence, for instance, in the book of Revelation, as metaphors that are not at all encouraging human violence. On the contrary.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
countering is to do, some with, some against.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really helpful, and it kind of leads me to, I know there's a lot more we can talk about regarding your book, but kind of kind of moving forward in the sense of thinking about kind of what this means now for us. Um, and one of the recommendations you give in the book is what you call that we should have an apocalyptic mindfulness. And maybe just tease that out a little bit for us. What do you mean by us having apocalyptic mindfulness?
Well, thanks. I think some of you who are listening have probably been interested in, for instance, Buddhist practice. And it's in Buddhism where there's a strong practice that it gets called in English mindfulness.
Mhm.
um, Mindfulness practice. So that's a little bit on my mind, though I'm not a practitioner of Buddhism. I certainly have friends who have been deep in Buddhism Zen, uh, and that that mindfulness is a practice of awareness of the present tense in its vividness, uh, in its presentness, which takes into itself my whole history, your whole history, our shared developing history. Buddhist mindfulness is really taking in all of those relationships that create this moment. And so, mindfulness practice is a kind of meditation that allows one to be more fully tuned to what's happening in the present. If one is in a, a Christian community, that mindfulness might involve a mindfulness to a kind of divine element that is, in some sense, uh, calling to us moment by moment. But by referring to an apocalyptic mindfulness, what I'm trying to do is keep countering the violent, explosive, or deterministic readings of the Revelation
Right.
that have not been a great influence on our history, uh, but rather uh, to bring into mindfulness the truth of the deep structures of imperial greed and violence, again symbolized by the mating of the the whore of Babylon and the beast.
Yeah.
uh, and that mating of vast power and vast wealth still seems to run much of the structures of our civilization, and therefore even of our own actions and unconscious, because we're within those structures. So partly it's apocalyptic mindfulness means being mindful of some oppressive structures that keep shaping our own reality, the reality that we share with each other, the way in which I, as an individual, am not separate from you two at this moment, especially
Right. Yeah.
from, from our world. And And that mindfulness is an awareness of the shared histories of oppression and greed, but also of the shared history of love, of inspiration, of alternatives, of meaningful dialogues across great difference, of activism for transformation, and of the hope that keeps us going, even in a time like the present time, where it's sometimes tempting to stay in bed and not look at the newspaper.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so a counter apocalypse insists on a kind of apocalyptic mindfulness. That is, we're not erasing the apocalyptic residues, the false kinds of apocalypse, and uh, the the hopeful kind. Uh, but it's wait, is there a problem?
Yeah, I want my coffee.
Oh, I was supposed to just take a sip.
Exactly.
Oh.
Well, that's really important theologically.
Yes, yes, exactly. Yeah.
Clear on that. I have a greedy side too. But in apocalyptic mindfulness, I would have only taken the sip and handed back. I
Right,
had
right.
up to him. That my apocalypse was minding you two a little bit more attentively. So apocalyptic mindfulness has its limitations, uh, but it says let's not just uh, repress all the threats of our civilization right now and building up to right now. Let's not just unplug and either say, oh, it'll be okay. Don't worry about it. Don't be so hysterical. Don't be so histrionic. Don't be so apocalyptic.
Right, right. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
a lot of evasion, oh, it's not so bad. Or on the other hand, just jumping in to a kind of self-literalizing apocalypse where we're just assuming everything's everything's going downhill. It's too late. I might as well,
right.
pull myself out of my depression and eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we all die. So apocalyptic mindfulness tries to avoid both of those extremes of a kind of depressive yielding to negatively apocalyptic forces, and of a kind of overconfidence in the positively apocalyptic forces of, the new beginning. No, we have to, I think, stay mindful of the kind of tension, uh, struggle, and hope.
Yeah, yeah,
This tradition.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's good.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, which is sponsored by the San Diego United Methodist Church's new contemporary worship service called The Garden. The Garden is a safe, inclusive, affirming place where people can explore faith and ask life's big questions.
Yeah, we invite you to join us if you're in Southern California to join us here at San Diego United Methodist Church. Our worship is Sunday morning at 9:30. If you're not able to join us in person, we're also available virtually, and the garden worship is at 11 o'clock. And we encourage you, if you're available, if you don't have a church home, to come and check us out. Also, for those of you that are following our podcast, we would ask you to if you view this and you've enjoyed this conversation, just to give us a thumbs up and let us know that you appreciate the conversations that we're having. And again, Catherine, we're so grateful that you would take time to be with us today. Appreciate so much the ways in which you're engaged in the kind of work and ministry that you're a part of through your writing, through your speaking.
Yeah.
And certainly you've helped us kind of have a broader image about understanding this vision in the book of Revelation in ways that hopefully would compel us to, as you use this language, this apocalyptic mindfulness, to be aware of what's going on around us and to have a voice to speak against.
And just one last word,
Yes.
beyond thank you, several words of thanks, but just to make clear what I might not have, that it's good always to remind people that apocalypse does not mean the end of the world. The
That's
word in
right.
Greek, apocalypsis, means to disclose, not to close, not to
Right.
shut down. It's opening up.
Yeah. No,
Thank
that
you for your
that
conversations and your work
yeah,
together.
well, thank you. And again, we really appreciate you joining us on the podcast. And for those who are watching, we hope that this helps you to think through and to continue to be engaged in ways that make a difference in our world. So thank you so much.